An Evening at Giza, a one-act play, was written by Debbie Wise. The play was created for the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, in support of its efforts to develop a fund for new acquisitions of ancient Egyptian art. Originally written for the stage, it was adapted recently into a radio play for broadcast. The radio play has been modified slightly for this performance on cable TV. The parts of ancient Egyptian Queen Hetepheres and American Egyptologist George Reisner are played by Dominic Sutherland and Frank Garvin. Narrating is Uzay Sezen. Rich Schifferdecker co-directs with the author Debbie Wise. Tonight, with a little help from your imagination, we will take a journey to Egypt. It is early evening now on the Giza Plateau, located 8 miles southwest of Cairo in northern Egypt. The site of the largest man-made pyramids and giant sphinx, Giza is the necropolis of some of the greatest rulers of ancient Egypt's old kingdom. The enormous and imposing pyramid tombs of the pharaohs, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure dominate the landscape of the plateau. Formerly known by their Greek names as Cheops, Khafron, and Mycerinus, these three kings, who were father, son, and grandson, each had a monumental pyramid constructed during their lifetime as their final resting place. Built during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom of Ancient Egypt, roughly 2,500 years before the current era, the pyramids are some 4,500 years old. They were made of millions of tons of carved limestone blocks and the efforts of thousands of workers, and required years of labor. Khufu's pyramid is the oldest and largest monument on the site, measuring 753 feet square and 478 feet high. Called the Great Pyramid, it is thought to have taken 20 years to complete, and it is the only remaining of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It continues to be the largest man-made pyramid on Earth. On the eastern edge of the plateau, set apart from the 3 pyramids, crouches the Great Sphinx, half man, half lion, and thought to have been built by King Khafre and bear his image. It guards the necropolis. All 3 pyramids and the Sphinx have been the silent witnesses to history as it has unfolded over the past millennia. The pyramids have also been a great beacon for thieves who disturb the tranquility of the deceased on the plateau, searching for the many valuable objects that were buried with them for their use and comfort in the afterlife. It was a constant challenge to construct tombs that would remain hidden and withstand the incursions of tomb robbers. Over the years, new innovations were conceived and new methods and practices evolved to thwart ever-adapting transgressors. But on the Giza Plateau, where the presence of above-ground structures, most notably the 3 looming pyramids, indicated the location of many tombs, not even a vigilant and well-armed corps of guards nor the threat of the most horrific of penalties were adequate deterrents to protect the generations of royal family, high-ranking nobles, and officials interred on the site. Over the centuries, robbers infiltrated nearly all of the tombs, stripping them of their valuables and violating the mummies of the deceased. Later, scholars and archaeologists would come to uncover, excavate, and study the thousands of tombs and mortuary temples on the site. One of the many tombs at Giza was that of Queen Hetepheres, consort of King Snefru and mother of Khufu, who would rule after his father and build the Great Pyramid. Her tomb next to her son Khufu's pyramid had remained undisturbed and undiscovered for 4,500 years until located in 1925 by the team of George Reisner, the celebrated American Egyptologist. Out on the plateau, the setting sun hangs on the horizon, emitting the last of the day's rays, silhouetting the pyramids and the Sphinx. The air is still and it is quiet as almost all the tourists who daily swarm the site have left. Join me now as we pass into the afterlife, as visitors only, of course. We will stay just a short while, so there's nothing to fear. As we enter this parallel realm, a multitude of finely crafted structures in a style of an ancient time long past materializes. These are the residences in which the Old Kingdom royal family members, priests and officials buried at Giza now dwell. These buildings are not normally visible, but then this is an extraordinary evening and we're the privileged observers of this other world. We're drawn into one of the royal residences and enter the living quarters of Queen Hetepheres mentioned just a moment ago. We pass through a lovely courtyard open to the night sky, surrounded by lotus-top columns, and step into a bright torchlit room. The room, which is of a modest size, is simply but luxuriously decorated, the furnishings being made of the finest materials as befits the mother of a king. The walls of the room are covered with colorfully painted geometric patterns of floral motifs. In the center of the room are two gilded wooden chairs decorated with papyrus clusters and delicate inlay work. Between the chairs is a handsome low table of ebony and ivory. Upon closer inspection, we see that this is no ordinary table, but a beautifully crafted square board game set on carved ebony animal legs. On top are 58 holes going around the surface for the game pieces. There are 10 stick pawns, 5 carved with the head of a dog and 5 with the head of a jackal. This is the game, Hounds and Jackals. The people of ancient Egypt enjoyed playing games and other pursuits just as we do today, and this game was one of their favorites. Adjacent is a stately gilded wooden table laden with refreshments, appetizingly presented for the players to enjoy. Seated in one of the chairs by the game table is Queen Hetepheres. She's fine-boned and very elegant, and her movements show her great bearing. She is dressed in a long pleated white linen gown, set off by tasteful though richly decorated jewelry at her throat, ears and arms. She wears a wig of plaited dark brown hair. We can see that she has retained much of the beauty of her youth. Her makeup only serves to accent her striking features, with her eyelids touched with a turquoise powder, her eyes lined with kohl, and her lips a bright red. Across from her, at the low game table, sits the esteemed Boston Egyptologist George Reisner. He is a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a broad mustache. Although elderly, he's still very spry. Looking much like Theodore Roosevelt in his physical appearance, Reisner's resemblance to the former president ends there, as he's a serious, scholarly man with a passion for detective novels. He is always impeccably dressed, even when out on a dig, and wears a tailored American suit in the style of the early 1940s. As Reisner intently leans over the game board considering his strategy, Hetepheres sits back in her chair trying not to show her concern. He takes a puff from his pipe and then tosses 3 game coins. Smiling, he moves one of his pawns on the board, winning the game to the great displeasure of his opponent, Hetepheres.
3 heads, just what I needed. That's the game.
You've gotten too good, Reisner. I never should have taught you this game.
Just beginner's luck.
You'd like to have me believe that, wouldn't you? But we've been playing this game for 65 years now.
Has it been that long?
We started playing shortly after your arrival.
You're right, of course. 1942. Time certainly has flown by.
It can. Though eternity can also be interminable.
But when one has amusing pursuits and such charming company, time passes all too quickly. How I do look forward to our little tete-a-tetes each week.
Flatterer.
True. And if I become skilled at this game, it is because you are an excellent teacher.
Apparently, I taught you too well. And you were a very eager learner.
You're not going to begrudge me winning a game now and then.
I suppose not.
I always wanted to know how to play this game.
Hounds and jackals.
Hounds and Jackals. Certainly a most ominous name for a game. Since it was first found in the tomb of Reni-Seneb from the 12th dynasty, it was always supposed that the rules were very complex.
And actually, it's the most rudimentary of games. The rules are quite uncomplicated.
Yes, just a matter of throwing 3 coins and moving 5 pawns around one side of the board. It would seem easy enough, but there is definitely a strategy to winning.
Which you seem to have mastered.
Compared to the 4.5 millennia you've been playing, I am a rank beginner. I still feel there are some nuances that I have yet to pick up, or that you have yet to share with me.
And what sort of challenge would that be if I told you everything?
You should know that I've never shrunken from any challenge in my life.
Ah, in your life?
You know what I meant. Interested in a rematch?
Perhaps later.
Yes. Things are not always as they seem. Dissimulation would seem a characteristic common to Egyptians.
Are you referring to the game or something else?
I was thinking about the game, but now that you've brought it up, I don't understand why you must be so secretive and evasive with me.
About what? Pray tell.
You know perfectly well.
Oh, I see. You must be speaking about my tomb. You are most persistent, that is certain.
And determined. Essential traits of a good archaeologist.
I've come to realize that.
Well then,
Well, what?
stop toying with me at the Perrys. Won't you tell me what happened to your tomb and to you? I've been dying to find out.
So you have? That's quite ironic, isn't it?
Yes, quite. And so,
Why must you spoil our evening by insisting? We were having such a pleasant time. Well, at least until you won that last game.
I can't understand why you won't discuss this with me.
And I can't understand why you won't just let it go. Of what importance is it now?
It is very important to me, to the archaeological world. It is the greatest mystery I encountered in my entire lifetime's work. I can't let it go. My scientific curiosity won't allow me to.
I thought we've been through this all before.
Not really. I have tried to discuss my theories with you, and you've appeared to listen rather intently for that matter, but you never reacted or commented on what I said to confirm or refute.
It's all so long ago now. Who can remember?
Now, at the Perrys, you're not going to try to tell me. I mean, how could you possibly forget?
No, I guess I haven't. Though frankly, you disappoint me. I don't see why the great archaeologist George Reisner of Harvard University and the Museum of Fine Arts Boston needs to have help solving a small riddle.
Small riddle indeed.
You've told me many times of your great interest in detective novels. You've even written a number of them yourself. So, you should appreciate a good mystery.
That's all very true, though there's never been a mystery that has puzzled me more than this one. I've heard about other theories being proposed, those of Mark Lenner and Zahi Hawass, among others. I only want to know if I was on the right track.
All right, then. Let me assure you that your theories are absolutely brilliant. So well thought out and reasoned. I was quite impressed.
So you were paying attention.
Of course.
But was I correct in my assumptions?
About some things, yes. About others, no.
This is like speaking to the enigmatic sphinx of Greek mythology.
I'll take that as a compliment. I like being a woman of mystery. Our sphinxes, though, have always been staunch guardians.
I know. And in your case, of secrets. You do enjoy keeping things close to your vest. Despite knowing you for some 65 years now, I don't really know much about you and your life. I know far more about your namesake granddaughter, Etta Perry's II. But then, she's been a lot more forthcoming and open.
I'm sure she has been. But then, She was always one to seek the limelight and be the center of attention. She was quite a little schemer, changing husbands and allegiances as she saw the political winds shift and she sought the power of the throne. And now me, on the other hand, I much prefer discretion. And I always tried to avoid getting entangled in intrigues. I know my son wanted to honor me, but I'm so embarrassed to have her named after me.
Ah, there. You're letting your slip show a bit. If more was known about you, your legacy would be even greater. You should think of that.
Perhaps I will.
So what would the harm be for you to provide a little personal insight on my theories?
And what would the challenge be if I told you outright? You yourself said just now you enjoy challenges. There. All right. Since you are so set upon it, why don't you tell me your theories again? And this time, I promise, I will comment.
Ah, wonderful.
There, you see, I can be very reasonable. I'm all ears.
Well, as you know, I've always felt that your tomb was originally at Dashur, near your husband Snefru's pyramid. Typically, a royal wife would be buried near her pharaoh husband.
That was our way, yes. Though it's very interesting, is it not? That no one has yet to find the site of this first tomb at Dashur.
Ah, just because it has not been found does not mean it does not exist.
That is quite true. But you yourself have deduced that I did not pass to the afterlife until my son's reign.
This we were able to learn from your son's mortuary sealings and the hieroglyphs on the furniture in your tomb at Giza, on which we found references to the mother of Cheops.
You mean the mother of Khufu?
Oh, yes, of course. It's a bad habit of mine to still use the Greek name instead of the Egyptian one. But then that was the convention in my day. I guess old habits die hard.
So it seems. Well, it would have been up to my son, Khufu, to determine where I was to be buried.
I still felt it natural that your son would have you buried near his father, the great Snefru, builder of 4 pyramids.
4, yes, but none could compare to the single, immense, and most perfect pyramid of Khufu. His pyramid was the largest ever to be conceived by man. You see, Khufu was an even greater pharaoh than my husband, and he had the most grandiose plans for his tomb complex. You should have seen the activity at Giza. It was unprecedented. So don't you think he might want to share the glory of his great accomplishment with me, his mother?
Ah, are you saying that your tomb was originally at Giza?
Let me just say that transporting the contents of my tomb from Dashur to Giza in secret would not have been easy. The distance between the two is not insignificant.
It's quite possible that I may have been mistaken about Dashur. Yes, indeed, quite possible. In any case, given the conditions of your tomb at Giza, with all the funerary objects placed higgledy-piggledy in a sort of reverse order, the sarcophagus not square in its damaged side against the wall, basalt fragments from the paving above in the offering niche, and some apparently forgotten objects found in the burial shaft, it clearly had all the earmarkings of a reburial.
All very astute observations. And all very likely. Go on.
Well, I had speculated that your first tomb had been entered and plundered, perhaps as soon as very shortly after your burial, by cemetery guards or workers. With the focus on Giza, a tomb at Dashur would not have been very well guarded, though if the reburial was from a site at Giza, one perhaps with a superstructure, it could have attracted the attention of thieves and become a target despite the additional protection there.
Giza was a great fortress of the dead. But even the greatest fortresses can be transgressed. And man's greed is a very powerful force to contain.
There has always been a timeless struggle between those who sought to conceal their valuable treasures for eternity and those who sought ways of obtaining them.
That, I suppose, is unfortunately a simple fact of human nature. Greed is a vice that can tempt men from all strata of society.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting to you that the vermin who dared enter my tomb to commit their vile acts might have been under the orders of others who were highly placed.
That is an incredible claim to make.
Well, why not? The sanctity of the tomb has never been the barrier that it should be.
That is patently clear. In any case, these robbers must have been caught in the act, since not much appeared to be missing from the tomb.
Not much, just my body.
Yes, of course. With all the valuables in your mummy wrappings, the robbers would naturally have sought it out. First, removing the mummy from the sarcophagus, they would have taken it to a secluded area where they could strip it of its riches. Pressed for time as they probably were, that would have been the easiest and most lucrative thing for them to do. After that, I'm not sure what happened to your mummy, though I dare say wild animals would have probably come across it, dragged it off.
Reisner, please, you're referring to my mortal remains.
Of course. Do forgive me. Shall I continue?
Oh, please do. I'm quite intrigued to hear the rest.
Well, before other items could be taken from the tomb, the robbers were discovered, assuming that the theft was contemporary to the reign of your son.
Although that has yet to be proven.
Perhaps you will indulge me a few moments so that I may try to prove the case?
As you like.
When the vizier found out that your tomb was entered by thieves, at all costs he could not have the pharaoh know that your remains were not intact. That would have been absolutely dire for him.
Oh, the dog would have been greatly punished for his lack of diligence as well as his deception.
The vizier would have arranged for a secret reburial of the contents of your tomb to ensure that this time its location could remain forever hidden.
And so much for that, huh, Reisner?
Well, the pharaoh never would have suspected that your mummy was no longer in its sarcophagus, and he would have arranged for offerings to have been left after the reburial, which explains the presence of offerings in the niche in the shaft.
Although those could have just been the remains of previously left offerings, which were moved with the tomb contents at the time of the reburial.
But then the style of your tomb discovered at Giza indicated that it was from the 3rd dynasty and had been altered in the beginning of the 4th. This would confirm a reburial soon after the original contemporary to Khufu's reign.
But the reburial could also have taken place at a later time, and the objects placed in an older, previously unused tomb at Giza. My son's original funeral ceilings would have been reused in the new tomb. Tomb robberies were, unfortunately, a particularly prevalent occurrence when leadership was weak and the country unstable, as during the chaotic intermediary periods.
Well, to recap then, wherever your tomb was originally, it was entered and robbed at some point by some parties unknown, and its contents moved at some later date we know not exactly when to the tomb at Giza, and there it remained, untouched for 4,500 years, give or take, as civilization came and went, great empires rose and fell, religions were born, great inventions were discovered, war and natural disasters convulsed the earth, until our discovery of it in 1925.
And we know what happened after that. Bravo, Reisner. That was quite entertaining.
Well, I'm glad that I've amused you with my theories about your tomb.
Yes, very much. Although, nowadays, there is even speculation about whether my tomb should even be considered a tomb. Some say it might just be a funerary deposit. Due to the rough condition of the construction, the state of many of the objects in the chamber, and, of course, the absence of a mummy.
Like Pluto being downgraded to a dwarf planet, they want to reclassify your tomb to the more humble funerary deposit. Just another aspect of my theories being torn to shreds.
Oh, don't be so glum.
I am not glum.
Well, you could have fooled me.
Just a bit disappointed, perhaps.
I'm sorry to have burst your bubble.
What?
Truly I am.
You have certainly poked a few holes in my theories, but you have also given me much to think about. Admittedly, there are some loose ends to tie up and several lingering questions to answer.
Such as why my sarcophagus lid was not smashed during the theft.
That's right. That was very uncharacteristic for a tomb that had been plundered. And then there's the small matter of your missing body.
A small matter indeed. Let me just say that I would never have abided it being borne away by animals.
There you go, wrapping a mystery around an enigma.
A lady must have her little secrets. I'm sure you have one or two of your own, Reisner.
Well, we're not talking about me. We're talking about you, Etta Perez.
And you think I'm evasive? You know, Reisner, I don't know if I can ever forgive you.
For what? In truth, Etta Perez, I've never kept a secret from you. Or is it that you're just still mad at me because I beat you at hounds and jackals?
Well, I'm a bit peeved about that, too. I don't like to lose, you know. Never have.
Admittedly, you are certainly not the most gracious loser, but you have always been a most gracious and charming hostess.
Oh, Reisner, you are ever the charmer, aren't you? I was referring to you disturbing my tomb.
That's all old history, isn't it? Just water over the Aswan Dam, as it were.
Oh, very funny. And all this talk of the past has dredged everything up again for me.
I'm sorry. You know I've apologized at least 1,000 times to you.
Well, I'm still upset about it. What do you mean by old history? Are you saying that I'm old?
Let's not get started on that again, shall we? Of course I didn't mean... You are the freshness of youth itself, my dear Queen Etta Perez. Though you are some 4,500 years old, but who's counting?
I heard that.
Well, it is a fact.
Well, I suppose it is. Now, nevertheless, I don't like you reminding me about my age. And I contend that it's very poor manners to keep track of age in the afterlife.
Sorry, it's an old habit. As an Egyptologist, it is just natural for me to date things. You should be proud of the history you represent.
I am, but when you put things in terms of numbers like that, I can't help but feel very ancient.
Oh,
And
afraid?
I become afraid
Afraid of what?
of disappearing into the sands of time, of fading into the past.
That won't happen. I promise you that.
How can you make that promise?
Because I know that it is in our discovery of your tomb that you will have achieved immortality at the Perrys, and that you will not be forgotten. Finding your tomb essentially intact with funerary objects was one of the greatest discoveries that was ever made. Your tomb provides a great source of knowledge about the old kingdom.
There you go again, saying that I'm old.
That is just how we define the various periods of ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt?
It is just a relative term and one of reverence.
But my tomb was entered, Reisner, undefiled. It's written in our sacred scriptures that one whose rest is disturbed will not be granted immortality.
Your tomb was not defiled by me at the Perrys. You yourself know that well. It was with the greatest respect and care that we entered your tomb at Giza and documented all our findings. Every layer, every inch was photographed, sketched, and recorded before it was removed. And then all the fragments of the objects were reconstituted.
I do know that. And I did appreciate it. I was particularly grateful for the efforts of your young assistant, Dowse Dunham. He was very considerate in how he handled the objects in my tomb.
He was a fine young man, a very hard worker, and extremely meticulous. The best assistant I ever had or could have ever asked for. He was more than my assistant. He was like a son to me.
You miss him, don't you?
I miss him. Saeed Ahmad, my foreman, and my Egyptian team, Harvard camp, and everything else from those days.
You certainly seemed in your element.
Despite the hardships, I was always happiest when out at a site digging and documenting.
Not even two great wars could make you abandon your work, it seems.
I was very fortunate to have been able to do what I loved so much and to have a family that understood my passion. I was doubly blessed.
Yes. Instead of bringing a curse down on your head from trespassing in tombs, even royal ones, no less, you've been blessed. And it's I who will be cursed. I still cannot believe how you found my tomb.
It was indeed quite extraordinary when you come to think about it.
And such great effort was made to conceal my tomb, just to have it found.
That effort was not in vain. It still took 4.5 millennia for your tomb to be discovered. Dug through 100 feet of solid rock, its axis a narrow shaft straight down, filled with heavy rocks and stones, sealed with a plaster plug, and covered with sand to camouflage it. It took us quite some time to get to the tomb, I assure you.
Still, the tomb was found. And so I'm doomed.
No, Etta Perry's, that is the tomb paradox. I understand that your tomb was to remain hidden as a way for you to achieve your immortality. But it is actually the discovery of your tomb that will ensure that you will never be forgotten. How else would the world know of you? Remaining beneath the sands of Giza, you would be forever hidden from the world.
Perhaps buried forever, but left in peace.
You can't tell me it has not pleased you to have your name spoken once again after so many years. A name that is spoken is never forgotten and lives on forever.
I do see the truth in what you say, Reisner. Still, I wonder, weren't you ever concerned about bringing a curse on yourself?
I never took any of that rubbish seriously, and as an intelligent woman, I would have thought that you wouldn't either.
We Egyptians, although intelligent, have always been very superstitious. And you forget what happened to Carter's expedition after the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb.
Ah, yes. Carter and Carnarvon. Those two were more fortune hunter and adventurer than scientist and Egyptologist.
Now, Reisner, that's not a very kind thing to say. Weren't you or Howard Carter colleagues?
I suppose it wasn't very kind, though I dare say it was quite true. And I would not consider us colleagues.
Oh, no.
Carter was a hack who just got lucky and stumbled onto his find.
Or like you got lucky and stumbled onto yours?
The two situations are completely different. The discovery of your tomb was no accident, but the result of the continuous, systematic clearing of the whole field, which was calculated to discover everything which lay concealed beneath.
If you say so.
Carter was most interested in seeking glory and treasure. Whereas I was most concerned with knowledge. That was my foremost objective.
Nevertheless, you did still manage to bring back some treasure as well, didn't you, Reisner?
Well, yes. Though the objects I received were granted to me by the Egyptian government in recognition for my work, it didn't stoop to taking advantage of a technicality like Carter did.
Of course.
Howard Carter had no proper training. What he did have was a bad temper, arrogance, ambition, and a complete lack of tact and good judgment, which caused a good deal of tension with the Egyptian authorities, making things difficult for us all.
You're not just saying all this because you're jealous?
Me? Jealous? Ha! Hardly.
His discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 did take away a lot of the thunder of your discovery of mine a few years later. All eyes were turned towards the Valley of the Kings and away from Giza.
The public and press were so dazzled and distracted by the treasures found in Tutankhamun's tomb, they could not always recognize the significance of the discovery of your intact tomb from the Old Kingdom. Your tomb certainly had its share of treasure, but it just could not compete with that of Tutankhamun's. And then there was something that Carter's tomb that mine did not.
Yeah, I know. There's nothing like finding a tomb with a resident mummy.
The public does seem to have a fascination for them.
I'm surprised you didn't go yourself to visit Tutankhamun's tomb. While the whole world was clamoring for a peek, you rejected Carter's personal invitation to visit the site.
I was far too busy with my own work to subject myself to that media circus.
Oh, I see.
Certainly. Though how they all do go on about Tutankhamun, the boy king. It amazes me to see how famous he has become when he was really only a minor figure. If it were not for the wealth of treasure found in his tomb, he would be a mere footnote in history. And now there is all this commotion made over the most recent exhibition about him, Tutankhamun and the golden age of pharaohs. It's all just a lot of hype and hyperbole. One certainly hears enough about Carter's discovery and Tutankhamun.
When they should be talking about Reisner and his discovery. And you say you're not jealous.
It's not like that at all. I could give a fig about the press and what people thought of me, but you, Etta Perry's, I wanted you to get your due.
I appreciate that, Reisner. I really do. Though there may not have been as much acclaim or attention, at least you were spared the curse.
All that about a mummy's curse is pure fantasy and fairy tale.
Death will slay with his wings whoever disturbs the peace of the pharaoh. And within several years of the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb, a number of people, directly or indirectly connected with it, died prematurely.
Really now, Etta Perry's, those were just a few bizarre coincidences. There is absolutely no empirical evidence that...
Oh, sure. You can think that if you like. But our curses are indeed serious matters not to be taken lightly.
What is irrefutable, though, is that with the uncovering of your tomb comes recognition of you, your glory, and your place in history. You were, after all, of royal blood, and the daughter, wife, and mother of pharaohs. Weren't you?
Of course. What do you think?
Well, now, I'm not so sure anymore. At any rate, I think we can safely say that you were the mother of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza. For that alone, the world should know of you.
You're right. It should.
Your rest was disturbed many years before we even came upon your tomb. And don't forget, you were not even in your tomb when we entered it.
Which was quite a disappointment for you, wasn't it? Wasn't it, Reisner? I'll never forget the expression on your face when you opened my beautiful alabaster sarcophagus.
And it was completely empty. Yes, I would imagine you'd find that amusing.
Never did I see such a look of surprise and bewilderment, and perhaps even a little embarrassment when you had to announce to everyone present, "Gentlemen, I regret Tipperess is not receiving."
Huh. I would think you might be the one embarrassed. You weren't at your own debut.
True enough. Although I was there in spirit. So much for your great triumph.
Which could have been yours as well.
Oh, yes, to have my body viewed, examined and put on public display like my possessions and the remains of my compatriots. I have seen how mummies have been treated after they were discovered. No, thank you very much. I think I rather prefer that not have happened. It's bad enough. My canopic chest was handled and exhibited.
Finding your canopic chest in the tomb and with your viscera was very important. It almost made up for your missing body. It enabled us to confirm how early the rituals of mummification were practiced. It was an extraordinary discovery.
So, you've told me before, but I still wonder about the removal of my funerary objects, especially my canopic chest from my tomb. That cannot bode well.
Many of the objects in your tomb, when we found them, had turned mostly to dust and fragments from the previous disruptions of your tomb and the passage of time. They've since been reconstructed and restored to their earlier luster and beauty, and are kept safe for you in two of the most celebrated institutions for ancient Egyptian art, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo and Museum of Fine Arts, Boston.
As I said, on public display.
But they are made available for the appreciation and learning of mankind for all time.
Sometimes I feel I'm like some creature in a zoo or an old relic.
That is not the case at all. Your beautiful jewelry, furniture, and other objects are well maintained and are given pride of place. They even have their own special climate-controlled room at the MFA. Great effort and expense went into the design and preparation of the room in which your tomb treasures could be presented in all their glory and splendor. There, people learn about you, your times, and your culture. I've offered to take you there to visit many times so you could see for yourself.
Yes, I know. I appreciate the offer, Reisner. Perhaps I will have you take me there someday.
Any time you wish. It would be my pleasure. So what is it about us human beings that make us so desirous of seeking immortality? This has been the case throughout the ages, all the world over. Ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, China, the Americas. Today, instead of mummification, there is plastination. This quest for immortality seems itself immortal. It is like we need to have confirmation of the significance of our lives, an eternal proof of the time we spent on earth. And in the end, it is this desire that ultimately leads to our immortality and the preservation of our culture, as we build monuments to recognize our existence and honor our accomplishments. You ancient Egyptians, above all others, have achieved immortality through your religious beliefs and funerary practice to attain passage to the afterlife. In the discovery of your tombs, temples, other buildings, and objects of daily life, you and your culture became known. Your obelisks are in the major world capitals. Your style of architecture and art have influenced subsequent cultures and can still be seen today. Your creations and artifacts are in museums and private collections throughout the world to forever be appreciated and studied. Special exhibits on ancient Egypt are numerous and among the most popular. What person does not know and admire ancient Egypt? What schoolchild does not want to first visit the part of the museum with the mummies? No other culture captures the imagination and fascinates and attracts admiration like ancient Egypt.
It is most heartening to see our culture and us appreciated in this way. And you know, Reisner, if I've gained immortality, I suppose that you have to.
How is that?
Well, you will always be remembered for having found my tomb. For that and many other accomplishments, you have earned much admiration. Like me, you've made history.
If that is the case, then I am truly honored. In my career, I have excavated many of the mastaba tombs in the cemetery west of the Great Pyramid, the burial place of nobles and officials from the reign of Khufu through the 6th dynasty. I have cleared the royal cemetery east of the Great Pyramid, which contained the tombs of the members of Khufu's royal family and their descendants. I have excavated the pyramid and valley temples of King Menkaure, the builder of the 3rd pyramid, and the 3 small pyramids of his queens. But of all the hundreds of tombs I excavated at Giza, and of all that I accomplished in Egypt, the Sudan, and Palestine, I consider your tomb to be my greatest and most significant discovery.
That pleases me a great deal, as it also pleases me to call you friend, my dear Reisner. But don't let this go to your head. I still don't think I can ever forgive you.
Never?
No, I think I may be mad at you, at least a little anyway, forever.
Forever is a long time, you know.
Yes, it is.
Well, that still gives me an eternity to work on you, to be granted your forgiveness, and discover what happened to you in your tomb.
Don't you mean funerary deposit?
No, I definitely mean tomb. So are you ready now for that rematch of hounds and jackals?
Well, I thought you never asked, Reisner.
Reisner and Heteperes reset the board and prepare to play another game of hounds and jackals. End of play. George Reisner was born November 5, 1867 in Indianapolis, Indiana, to German-American parents. He studied semiotics at Harvard University, where he received 3 degrees, and then went to Germany to continue his studies. In the second half of the 19th century, Egyptology was becoming a science in its own right, and the Egyptian Antiquities Service was established to prevent the systematic pillaging of historic sites and removal of artifacts abroad, which had been taking place unchecked previously. It was as the nascent science of Egyptology was still forming and developing that George Reisner was to come onto the scene, and he became a prominent founding father of modern archaeology and one of the foremost scholars on Egyptology of his time. His meticulous practices in the field, which involved photography, relatively new by that time, set the standard for scientific excavation techniques. Reisner had long affiliations with Harvard University, where he studied and later taught, and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, where he was curator of Egyptian art for over 30 years until his death in 1942. Most of his career was spent abroad, excavating in Egypt and the Sudan, and for a brief period, Palestine. He uncovered thousands of artifacts and hundreds of artistic masterpieces. Given his condescension towards Howard Carter and his experience level and expertise, ironically, when Reisner was given his first excavation job by Phoebe Hearst to head the University of California at Berkeley's expedition in Egypt, he had absolutely no field experience whatsoever. To develop his skills, he hired people who had experience and learned from them working at smaller, less prominent sites. Later, when he heard about the lack of rigorous control over excavations at Giza, he was incensed and resolved to work there, lobbying local authorities to make sure that excavation concessions were given only to professional archaeologists. Reisner always felt that the great treasures of ancient Egypt should remain in Egypt and turned over the objects he found to the Egyptian Antiquities Service for the Cairo Museum. For him, the main objective was always to increase knowledge, and he considered the behavior of other excavators like Howard Carter and their teams who sought to remove many objects from Egypt to be reprehensible. He refused to take advantage of a loophole in the rules, as Carter had done, in which excavators of tombs that had been determined not to be intact, that is to say previously broken into, could obtain a more significant share of the objects found. Reisner still obtained a share of objects for the MFA Boston and Harvard University, but these were allocated by the Egyptian government from the items he discovered in recognition of his successful recovery of the objects from the Queen Hatshepsut's tomb and the extraordinary work done to restore her furniture. These objects are among the treasures of the MFA's Egyptian and Nubian art collection and can be seen in its galleries today. His many other contributions notwithstanding, finding Hatshepsut's tomb in 1925 is considered to be Reisner's crowning achievement. Interestingly, it was when Reisner was in the US on one of his rare trips away from Egypt that the discovery was made of Hatshepsut's tomb shaft on February 13, 1925. And it was his team's photographer who found the site of the tomb. When the expedition's photographer noticed white plaster on the feet of his tripod after it had mysteriously sunk into the sand, he did not realize at first its significance. But when the plaster on the ground was later uncovered and removed, it was found that there was a staircase beneath it, which in turn led to a deep shaft filled with heavy limestone blocks and stones. The shaft, when cleared, proved to be 100 feet deep and connected to a burial chamber. After reaching the chamber, Alan Rowe, Reisner's assistant at that time, cabled him about the find. Reisner was not pleased at how the excavation had proceeded without him, nor how the press had been given the mistaken impression that the tomb belonged to Snefru. This was a great embarrassment to Reisner, who was always very cautious about releasing information to the press and detested publicity. He instructed Rowe to immediately close up the tomb and wait for his arrival. It would be 6 months later that Reisner would return to Egypt and take over the excavation of what would later be identified as Queen Hetepheres's burial tomb. And then it would take 2 years of hard, uncomfortable work for Reisner and his team to document and clear the tomb before the sarcophagus could be opened. Despite the lack of a mummy in the tomb, Reisner's find remains one of the most important discoveries from the Old Kingdom, since nearly all of the tombs of that period were largely empty. For this reason, the excavation site for Hetepheres's tomb still attracted press attention and had its share of visits from the notables of the day, which included Queen Elizabeth of Belgium, Queen Mary of Romania, and the Crown Prince of Sweden. Although Reisner developed a very detailed set of theories to explain the condition of Hetepheres's tomb, he was never 100% sure about what had happened so many years ago to her tomb and to her mummy. An avid reader of detective stories, Reisner amassed a personal collection of 1900 murder mysteries during his lifetime, which he left to Harvard University at his death. This passion undoubtedly fueled his intrigue about the mystery surrounding Hetepheres's tomb. It was a mystery that continued to pique and puzzle him throughout his life. To this day, there remains much speculation about Hetepheres's tomb, and new theories are constantly being advanced. Perhaps someday, new definitive evidence will be revealed to shed light on the numerous questions that surround Hetepheres and her tomb at Giza. In the meantime, the memories of Hetepheres and George Reisner will continue to live on. The Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, has one of the premier collections of ancient Egyptian and Nubian art in the world, containing some 70,000 objects. And its Egyptian department is the oldest in this country, celebrating its 100th anniversary a few years ago. In 2000, when the museum was preparing artifacts from the Old Kingdom to go to an exhibition at a sister museum in Nagoya, Japan, many of the objects, including replicas of Hetepheres's tomb furniture, were conserved and restored. It was then decided to rehouse all the objects from Hetepheres's tomb in a completely renovated and climate-controlled gallery of their own. Visitors of the MFA's Egyptian collection should not miss the opportunity to see this beautiful gallery. It was the joint Harvard University-Boston Museum of Fine Arts expedition under the direction of George Reisner, which undertook the single longest-running excavation at Giza from 1902 to 1947. The Harvard MFA expedition unearthed thousands of Giza artifacts and amassed the largest archaeological documentary archive of any expedition at the site. This archive is housed primarily at the MFA Boston and to a lesser extent at Harvard University. With the generous support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the MFA has made major strides since 2000 towards preserving and making this Giza archive available online. Now, in the process of combining the Harvard MFA archives with Giza materials housed in Europe, Egypt, and elsewhere in America, the Giza Archives Project website aims to become the world's central repository for the archaeological history of the site. All are invited to visit the project's website at www.mfa.org/Giza. The Giza Archives Project and its director Peter Dermanuelian have been a tremendous resource for this play project. The majority of the visuals used in this broadcast were obtained from the Giza Archives Project website.